Hello all, my name is Matthew Gorton, and today we will be talking about aquatic invasive species and some of the ways that Lewis Creek Association is working to eradicate them and to prevent their spread. So I wanted to start the webinar off with a video showing Lewis Creek Association's successful European Frogbit harvest at Town Farm Bay and at the lower LaPlatte River. So what are aquatic invasive species? Aquatic invasive species are non-native and cause damage to the environment, the economy, or human health. The Lake Champlain basin has around 51 non-native species, and around 12 of those non-native species are invasive. As you can see from the figure on our right, most of our aquatic invasive species are relatively new and have established themselves within the last 30 years. Aquatic invasive species can choke out waterways, killing off other species, and also prevent waterfowl from landing. This first photo was taken in the southern portion of Lake Champlain and is showing a dense water chestnut mat. Aquatic invasive species can also cause damage to infrastructure, leading to millions of dollars in repairs. This second photo is showing the impact of zebra mussels on water pipes. As you can see, the zebra mussels have formed a nearly impenetrable barrier to water movement through the pipe. And lastly, aquatic invasive species often prevent recreational activities such as swimming, fishing, and boating. Humans are responsible for the rapid spread of aquatic invasive species via the introduction of non-native species from other countries or regions to water bodies where they lack natural predators and competitors that would keep them in check. One example of humans unintentionally spreading invasive species is due to international trade. Zebra mussels were spread to the Great Lakes in the 1980s via the ballast water in cargo ships. Ballast water is water that is pumped into the ship after it is loaded with cargo to help offset the added weight of the cargo. This water is pumped into the boat from the water the ship is in. So a cargo ship coming from the Black Sea region would have pumped in water that contained zebra mussel villagers, which are the larval stage of zebra mussels. This cargo ship then crossed the ocean, unloaded its cargo in the Great Lakes region, and pumped out the water that contained the zebra mussels. Governments have now made laws to ensure that cargo ships dump their ballast water in the ocean before coming into freshwater ports, where they also pump in salt water to replace the fresh water. And then they can safely release the salt water into the freshwater port without much risk of spreading aquatic invasive species. This is due to the abrupt salinity change. Any freshwater organisms are killed in the ocean water, whereas the saltwater organisms are killed in the freshwater. Humans are also responsible for disrupting the balance of native ecosystems by changing environmental conditions, which make it easier for invasive species to invade. Stream sedimentation, ditching, building roads, and building dams disturb native species, making it easier for invasive species to invade those disturbed areas. The easiest way that aquatic invasive species are spread from water body to water body is due to human recreation. This occurs by people not removing invasive plants or animals from their boat and releasing their unused bait into the water. It is also important to remember that even native species can become invasive if you transport them to an ecosystem where they don't naturally occur. Therefore, it is extremely important to remove all plants and animals, regardless if they are native or not, from your watercraft and equipment. Biodiversity is severely reduced after aquatic invasive species invasions. Around 42% of the species on the federal threatened or endangered species list are at risk primarily because of invasive species. All of the species shown in these pictures can be found in Town Farm Bay and the LaPlatte River and could be at risk of losing their habitat if aquatic invasive species aren't stopped from spreading. Many invasive species function as ecosystem engineers, meaning that they significantly alter the environment that they invaded. For example, zebra mussels are small organisms that rapidly reproduce and severely alter the food chain and clarity of the water. They do this by feeding on microscopic plants, known as plankton, and microscopic animals, known as zooplankton, significantly reducing the food supply for native organisms. Zebra mussels are also helping the spread of aquatic invasive plants by making the water clearer. The clearer water allows the sunlight to penetrate deeper into the water column, which allows plants to grow in deeper water. Zebra mussels have also been linked with enhancing conditions for cyanobacteria blooms. The most effective way to combat invasive species is to prevent their spread to other bodies of water. Therefore, always remember to clean, drain, and dry your boat, equipment, shoes, and life jackets when you leave any body of water. Some organizations recommend waiting specific time periods before launching your boat into a new body of water. However, some aquatic invasive species can survive for extremely long periods of time in very little water. For example, zebra mussel villagers or spiny and fishhook water fleas are able to survive for extended amounts of time in a single drop of water. Therefore, you should ensure that your boat and equipment is completely dry before launching into a new body of water. Town Farm Bay was designated as a Vermont Natural Heritage Site and premier wetland by the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, the Nature Conservancy, and the town of Charlotte. Thorpe Brook and Kimball Brook form the large and diverse wetland complex as they enter Lake Champlain. Town Farm Bay is characterized by its large, deep bulrush marsh, cattail marshes, shallow emergent marshes, and its state rare buttonbush swamp. The wetland complex is surrounded by an intact floodplain forest that have stunningly beautiful mature silver maples which make you feel like you are on an entirely different planet. Town Farm Bay also provides valuable habitat for many species of fish, birds, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and invertebrates. Frogbit removal efforts began at Town Farm Bay in 2009. Initially, around 50% of the wetland was covered by frogbit, whereas now, less than 5% of the wetland is covered in frogbit. This wouldn't have been possible without volunteer effort. Lewis Creek Association also harvests frogbit at the LaPlatte River marsh. The Nature Conservancy refers to the marsh as a riverside oasis for migratory birds in Shelburne. The LaPlatte River and marsh provide extremely important habitat for migratory waterfowl in an extremely fragmented landscape. The LaPlatte River marsh, just like other marshes, is essential to filter and clean the water that flows from the LaPlatte headwaters into Lake Champlain. So now we're going to talk about European frogbit. European frogbit is native to Europe and Asia and was introduced to North America via Canada in the 1930s. Frogbit forms thick mats in still to slow-moving water. These mats decrease water oxygen and light levels, killing native plants and animals, negatively impact waterfowl and fish feeding and movement, and ensnare boat props, making boating difficult and sometimes impossible. Frogbit is a fast-growing, free-floating plant that is often found among native water lilies. Frogbit can be characterized by its small, leathery, heart-shaped leaves that are between 0.5 to 2.25 inches across. When in bloom, frogbit produces white, three-petaled flowers. Frogbit is able to spread rapidly and easily by horizontal runners, which are called stolons. These stolons form clones of the mother plant. Frogbit is also able to survive the winter by forming turions, which sink to the bottom of the lake or pond and then rise to the surface in the spring, forming new plants. Therefore, it is extremely important to harvest Frogbit before it's able to form turions. In Vermont, there are a few plants that look a little bit similar to Frogbit. So now we're going to talk about similar native plants and how they differ from Frogbit. Duckweed is a small, free-floating plant that has oval leaves that are between 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Spadderdock is another plant that some people confuse with Frogbit. However, it has a long stem that roots into the substrate and has large floating leaves that are up to 16 inches. Their leaves are also heart-shaped with round lobes, and they also produce a yellow flower. White water lilies are another aquatic plant that have long stems that root into the substrate. Their leaves are large and have pointed lobes, and they're known for their beautifully white many-petaled flowers. So now we're going to talk about other common aquatic invasive species that may be found in Town Farm Bay or the lower LaPlatte River. There's yellow iris, which forms these beautiful yellow flowers. However, yellow iris outcompetes and replaces native blue flag iris. Then there's Phragmites. And Phragmites outcompetes native vegetation and provides very little, if any, food or shelter for animals depending on marshes. It can grow so thick that large animals like deer are unable to penetrate it. Then there's flowering rush. Flowering rush has these beautiful pink flowers. And flowering rush grows densely along shoreland areas, making it difficult to access open water, and it outcompetes native aquatic plants. Then there's Eurasian Watermilfoil. I'm sure Eurasian Watermilfoil is the aquatic invasive species that most people are familiar with. Thick mats of Eurasian Watermilfoil provide unsuitable shelter, food, and nesting habitat for native Vermont species. Then there's curly-leaf pondweed. Like Eurasian Watermilfoil, curly-leaf pondweed forms dense mats of vegetation. Midsummer die-offs of curly-leaf pondweed can litter the shoreline with dead plants. And lastly, there's water chestnut. Water chestnut forms dense mats of rooted vegetation that can be impossible to get through in a boat. They also form fruits that have sharp spines with barbs that can cause painful wounds when stepped on. So now I'm going to give a brief overview of the Lewis Creek Association for those of you who may not be as familiar with the group. The Lewis Creek Association is a local nonprofit watershed group that works with the towns of Shelburne, Charlotte, Heinsberg, Moncton, Starksboro, and Ferrisburg, also known as the Middle Lake Champlain area, to improve water quality, among other goals. When local volunteers found Frogbit in Town Farm Bay and brought it to their attention, they developed a plan for control efforts and implemented it with volunteer help and town funding. They also study and work to remove other aquatic invasive species or prevent introductions through their boat launch steward program this summer at Bristol Pond, sample water quality in our watersheds, plan for and implement water quality improvement fixes through their Ahead of the Storm program, and work to conserve and protect important wildlife habitat and ecosystems. So now I'm going to show you a quick video of how fun it is to volunteer for the Lewis Creek Association.
I'm Ella Woodruff. I decided to volunteer for the Lewis Creek Association because I'm interested in ecology and conservation, and this was a good way to do that and get involved in my community. Town Farm Bay was nice because it was a really good excuse to get out on the water in the middle of a hot summer day, and also it was picking up Frogbit. I felt like I was helping out. Yeah, it's super easy to volunteer. They've got everything for you. You just show up and get in the water and help out. All right, so if you can, please volunteer.
Please consider volunteering with the Lewis Creek Association. It's an extremely easy way to get out on the water, and it's something that you can do with your family and your friends. We always recommend signing up to volunteer with a group of your family or friends because there's no better feeling than making a meaningful difference while getting to hang out with those that you love. We'd like to say thank you to our funders, in particular the towns of Shelburne and Charlotte, who fund our invasive species removal work in their towns, and the Lake Champlain Basin Program, and the New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission, who funded the work to upgrade this presentation. So thank you so very much for joining us tonight, and I hope that you have a great rest of your evening.